Hello and welcome to episode 5 of C++ Weekly. I'm your host Jason Turner. Once a week we'll pick some topic of interest in C++ and dig into it with some live coding. This week I got a request from a Twitter user to do an intro to ChaiScript video. So in this video we'll set up ChaiScript and cover some of the gotchas that first-time users might hit. So we're going to start on the ChaiScript homepage, where I would expect the average user might start. And we have, before we actually download ChaiScript, let's look to see that we have a link down here at the bottom right to open a gitter.im chat. If you use Gitter, I am likely to respond to you relatively quickly within a day, depending on how much I'm paying attention. Or you can tweet about ChaiScript, which I will follow. Or you can use the Discourse forums. And there's a fair bit of conversation on Discourse that might be helpful to you. So we have here this giant download button. We'll go ahead and click that. And we see that there are binary builds for macOS, Linux, and 32-bit and 64-bit Windows. Now, ChaiScript is a header-only scripting library for C++. The fact that it's header-only means that these binary builds, downloads, are not necessarily terribly helpful to you. They can be used to just download and play with the ChaiScript command line and get familiarity with it if you want to, but generally speaking, you just need the source file. So we're going to download the tar. And save that to our downloads folder. It should be tiny. Yes, it is already completed downloading. So I already have a folder set up here that's empty and ready to go for this episode. So we will untar our freshly downloaded ChaiScript package. And we see that it created this folder that has all of our files in it. Now I'm going to be doing all of these demonstrations from the Linux command line, but they should be essentially the same from any other compiler, and I do fully support Clang and GCC and Visual Studio on Windows, Mac, and Linux, although expect to have some problems if you're trying to use MinGW on Windows due to some bugs in the compiler. So we might obviously start with this ChaiScript basic example that is here on the main page. So let's copy that. Okay, so we have our basic example that registers a function called hello world with the ChaiScript engine here. And then we evaluate a string using raw string literals. And we call the function hello world, which should return back to us calling the C++ function hello Bob exclamation point, which then we use the ChaiScript puts function to print that to the screen. And now I have my Vim setup here configured so that if I have the word ChaiScript in the middle of my raw string literal in C++, that it will do the right thing and do ChaiScript syntax highlighting inside. So I've just enabled that feature here, and if you are interested in that, you can get that from the ChaiScript GitHub page also. So we want to compile our test ChaiScript, but what do we need to do? ChaiScript is a header-only library, so we need to make sure that we include the ChaiScript header folder. And for the sake of this, we're going to use Clang 3.6, which I believe will give us the fastest compile times. So let's start here. First, if we try to do that, then we get an obvious error, ChaiScript.hpp cannot be found. So we include the header file. Whoa, what is this? Now we got all kinds of other compiler errors about unique lock not being found and everything else. Oh, here we go. A clue that must be enabled with standard equals C++ 11. All right, std equals C++ 11. So now we're happily compiling, which takes maybe 30 seconds, but since I have the recording software going at the same time, we'll see what happens. There we go. Alright, what is this now? We have undefined symbols, and I said this is a header-only library. It is true that it is a header-only library with no external dependencies, but on Linux you need to link in the dynamic linker, so -ldl. Unfortunately, it has to compile the whole thing again because we're not doing a separate compile and link stage with this example. There we go. So that compiled, and we run a.out, and now we get another error. What is this? Terminate called after throwing an instance of ChaiScript, exception, load module error. And the error is unable to find module, ChaiScript, standard lib, -5.8.1. Now what happened here is that even though ChaiScript is a header-only library, we have the option of being able to load the ChaiScript standard library and the main ChaiScript executable separately. So we use dynamic loading to load the ChaiScript standard library. And this can help you split up your compilation to get better compile times, and also reduces the overall burden of using ChaiScript because you don't have to include the entire standard library header file every time you need to use any other ChaiScript header file. So this default example here is perhaps not the best one to have on the front page because it overlooks the fact that ChaiScript is going to attempt to find its standard library at runtime. So let's click on the examples page, and we have, let's see if I can make this a little bigger. We have this compiled in standard library example. Now the only difference here, it's two differences, is that we include the ChaiScript standard library header and we pass an instantiation of the ChaiScript standard library to the ChaiScript constructor. So let's do those two things. And here. So this is probably something that I should make a note of or change on the main ChaiScript page. So now we're compiling with the standard library being compiled in. And we got a linker error because the standard library by default is thread safe and has some threading functions exposed to it. So we need to add -pthread to our compilation line. Many of these, if you're familiar with CMake, I'm still getting used to switching over to NVim from Vim. If you're used to CMake, you can come in and read the source code for our build here and see that we do things like pass -pthread and make some special considerations depending on which compiler version, on which specific version of Ubuntu we happen to be compiling against. And actually, it's been a while since I've tested it, but we do have Haiku and FreeBSD support, which do not require -LDL to be passed in. And if you're curious, also, we compile against a rather stringent list of compiler warnings on every platform that we can. So that's finished. We execute, and now we see that we get our function hello Bob. Well, this is going to get a little bit tiring, having to recompile ChaiScript every time we want to say hello to a different person. So let's see if we can do something like eval a local file. That should work. Let's start that compiling. And over here, is that correct? Hello world, Bob. There we go. If you're using a version of Vim that's been released in, say, the last 5 years, you already have ChaiScript syntax highlighting support in. And we don't have really any other languages that we have support for. Any other editors that have support for ChaiScript. But you're welcome to add one and let me know if you do, and I would be happy to promote it and list it on the ChaiScript site. So now our hello world is our test ChaiScript that is calling our test.chai file. So we can say hello, I don't know. Say hello world, and then add a new line to the end of it. Okay, so this is working. Now, what happens if we do something silly like put an escape slash here so that we've got an unterminated string in our hello world? Now we get this incomplete function call in test.chai line 4. So that's not too bad. It tells us that it starts on line 4 and on character 7. That actually should probably say column 6. But we don't really, maybe we're overlooking this little backslash right here and we're trying to figure out what's going on. So ChaiScript tries to have very robust error reporting. So we can actually wrap this in a try-catch block. Const catch const. I'm going to quickly refer back to the official ChaiScript eval command line tool, which I recommend you also do if you have some of these questions. So actually, let's keep this really simple. I am going to copy this eval error block and paste it in here. Alright, so in this code we try to evaluate the file test.chai, and if an evaluation error occurs we catch it by const reference, we print out what the error was, and then if there is a call stack available we print out the error of what happened on the first call stack execution. But we can Let's compile this. All right, that's compiling. We should be able to do better than that, though. Here we go. If we see here, we have this function, eval error has this function called prettyprint. And prettyprint actually walks through all of the items in the call stack and gives us a full explanation of what happened. And that's a built-in feature. And I strongly recommend that you use this when you're trying to debug your own ChaiScript. Yeah, that's not nearly as helpful yet. All right. Now we can really give it something to complain about. ChaiScript will let you can optionally use semicolons. Either one, they're not necessary. Maybe kind of wish in retrospect that I had made them required. There we go. So in this particular case, now that we're doing the pretty print output, we see I am trying to add a 1 to a string, and we get cannot find appropriate plus operator with the parameters const string, const int, at eval, chai, test.chai, line 5, and it gives us a breakdown of what options were available. We could add 2 numbers, or we could do a unary operation on a number, or we can add 2 strings, and it tells us exactly where that happened. This could definitely be prettier, and I'm working on that. Some of the refactoring that I'm doing for ChaiScript 6 should lead to much better output in these kind of errors, but at the very least you get the entire stack and what line numbers each of these things occurred on. So now that we have this set up, we can actually play around with ChaiScript a little bit. And we can see that we can do things like in string evaluation. So we can say hello world 4, and we've printed it 10 times. And ChaiScript has other interesting things, like if we were so inclined, we could add our own plus operator for string objects that takes an integer. Typing, you can do, I could say I here, and then return this plus I dot to string. And that would actually let us do plus 1 plus 4. Oh. Case error. But at least my error here told me something was not quite right, that there was an undefined type being used in one of those overloads. There we go. So I've just defined my own plus operator that's an extension of the string type Or I could specify specifically that I want it to take an integer, and now if I try to pass in actually with automatic type conversions I could, well, so if I pass in 5.2, then we're getting the integer truncated. We're getting the floating point number 5.2 truncated to an integer because I specified that it must be an integer. But I could also make a floating point overload. So I could say double. There. So we get two different overloads. If we put, let's get this out of this for loop here. All right, so in the case that it is called with a double, we get an F appended to it. In the case where it is called with an integer, we do not, because it's properly dispatching on the different overloads. Now, this is something that I believe sets ChaiScript apart from most other programming scripting languages, in that it has typed overloads built in. And I kind of had to do that to be able to work well with C++. So there are many other things that ChaiScript can do. This is just a very simple getting started. I might just quickly try to show one other thing that I think is the most powerful, unique feature of ChaiScript. If I can remember which editor I'm using. So let's try to do this. We want a function that returns an integer. And takes, let's see, a standard function that returns an integer. What is the best way to do this? Best way to illustrate what I'm trying to show here. Okay. We are taking a standard function that expects two integers and returns an integer, and we are going to call it with those two integers and return its value. This is a very, very straightforward example. So we're going to add our new function called doSomething that expects a function to be passed to it. And we're going to start this compiling. And we're going to see exactly what this means. So we can define a function in ChaiScript. Let's call it add, and have it take two ints. And we can return I plus j. And actually in ChaiScript this return statement is gratuitous. It just returns the last value. So we can really make our entire function just kind of look like this. And we could do another one that does a div and returns I divided by j. And then we can call our function doSomething and say pass in 6 and 4 and the add function, and do something. Working with integers here, let's do 8 and 4 and the div function. And we will put these, actually, So this first one should print 6 plus 4, which is 10, and the second one should print 8 divided by 4, which would be 2. Alright, there we go. That worked as expected. We see the results here. So ChaiScript allows us to do a seamless passing of C++ functions into ChaiScript and ChaiScript functions back into C++, which gives you some really powerful constructs for creating callbacks and whatever kind of objects you need to manage in your application. So thanks for your time, and I hope this was a good introduction to ChaiScript. And as always, let me know if there's anything that you want me to cover or anything about these videos that you think I could improve upon.